Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So tonight I'm going to be reacting to a video that's been up for a number of years. I happen to know the guy who did this video some years ago. And I says, well, why not, reignite this video? It's got quite a few views over the years. So I says, why not, discuss it? Um, as you know, my objective all along has been to bring the question of race, the question of the situation of Black Brazilians to an English speaking audience. So when I come across Black Brazilians who want to speak about this issue, I'll highlight them in a video or in a blog post. And, even more, if it's a Black Brazilian that's speaking English, that's even better. It's obviously it's easier because I don't have to do an overdub. I just let them speak for themselves. So tonight I'm reacting to a video that I entitled, Bring Me a White Man Home. My Black grandmother told all the women in the family to marry white men to purify our blood from African ancestry. Just from the title, what do you think this interview is going to be all about? I mean, it should be pretty obvious. I'm going to go through it, but before I do, make sure you like this video, share this video, consider subscribing to the channel. Click on the notification bell so you know when I put up new videos. And with that said, let me put this video a little bit in context before I get into the video itself. So, as you know, the topic once again is interracial unions in Brazil, and I'll maintain again and again. I have nothing against interracial relationships, but I reserve the right to be able to analyze how they come about. It's real simple to just say two people fell in love and that was just it. But let's get real. I mean, if we can know that women can be very much influenced by how deep a man's pockets there are before she marries him, or what future he can provide for her. If a man looks at a woman and he's attracted to her, she's young, beautiful, what they call fit and feminine or whatever. There's ulterior motives. There's other motives that come into play than just I fell in love with that person. If we can admit that people do look for certain qualities in a possible partner, why can't we acknowledge that there can be some racial factor that's involved in that situation as well? As we know, for at least a century and a half, Brazil has had this embranquecimento or whitening agenda going on. It's a social engineering pattern that says Black and brown Brazilians need to continue mixing with whiter partners so that we can produce a whiter Brazil. There's there's really no way to deny that. Too many books that spoke about it. Love or other motives, as I've just said, what causes, some Black people to prefer whiter partners? Where's this ideology coming from? Brazilians recognizing anti-Blackness in their own families. That's something that I've covered on the blog as well, and of some of the videos that I've done. It's just that, again, on the outside, people want to say love has no color, amor não tem cor, as they say in Portuguese. But then when people start to really analyze some of the things that are being said within their families, if they come out of an interracial family, and they'll notice some of the comments and the jokes that come out of the whiter side of the family that says, for years, people just accepted that as normal until people got what they call racial literacy, and they started understanding, like, some of the things that the white side of the family would say about the Black side was just very racist. But because we were accustomed to it, nobody really said anything. I want to discuss the idea that me personally, I'm against interracial unions simply because I like to analyze this topic. And that's not the point that I'm against interracial unions. I just reserve the right to be able to analyze any social phenomenon that we have going on can be analyzed. And that's really the only thing that I want to understand, because this understanding of the theory of embranquecimento, and then when I come to discover that a lot of Black Brazilian women were, they were questioning why so many prominent Black Brazilian men were marrying white women, that became a topic to me because I didn't discover that, Black Brazilian women felt this way until around 2005. So it's been an intriguing point for me ever since then. And then 2013, Afro-Brazilian feminists started, talking about palmitagem, this idea that, Black men prefer to have white women as a status symbol, as a way of having respect in society, saying that they've made it. And apparently also to have whiter looking children. Now, years later, Black Brazilian men would say that about Black Brazilian women as well. And there's plenty of proof of that. So this has nothing to do with it. I have discussions with people, and I just noticed that over the years, more and more people in Brazil are recognizing the history of interracial unions in Brazil, how it was kind of like promoted to make the darker elements of the population disappear. When I would bring this to people, people just they rejected it. They didn't believe what I was saying. That's a conspiracy theory until I could show them documents like this can be just you can follow the steps. In the late 19th century, early 20th century, where there were Brazilian statesmen and important people talking about, look, we need to whiten this population. So then when people start thinking about it, my grandmother and my mother used to always tell me, you should try to bring home somebody white. So then when they sit and think about this, it's like, you can't just throw this on me because this is something that happens in your family. Like I said, I used to talk to a lot of Black Brazilians, mixed Brazilians or whatever. And people, when they sat and thought about it, like, yeah, that people would say that in my family, like, bring home somebody white, you know? Now, the other part I want to mention about how this video came about, the author, Habeeb Akande, this guy right here, I met him back in 2013 when he came to Sao Paulo. Um, I'd say for I don't know, maybe the first 10 years of the blog, my blog originally started off as Black Women of Brazil before I switched the title to Black Brazil Today. There were people all over the world who were contacting me, wanting to do interviews. They wanted to cite things from the blog that they found intriguing. They would use some of my material for their dissertations, and I really appreciated the fact that people found value in the work. So Habeeb contacted me via email. He said, I'm coming to Sao Paulo. I want to meet you and let's talk about race. I want to get your perspective on race. So what happened was that when he arrived in Sao Paulo, we decided to get together at this shopping mall. I kind of shared some of it in this story from 2018. He sent me an article in 2018. That was a year of the World Cup. It was 4 years after Brazil had hosted it. And he saw the same thing that I had saw. I think I did an article the previous 4 years in 2014 when Brazil hosted the World Cup. And so he submitted this article to me and says, Marcus, can you post this on the blog? And I called it The Whitening Process and Transfer of Black Money Continues. 76% of Brazil's World Cup stars marry white women. Is love really colorblind was my question, So this just explains a little bit of how I got together with Habeeb, and then another brother popped up. So this is from 2018. The origin of how today's article came out is quite intriguing. In 2013, I was contacted by a London-based Nigerian writer who was doing research on a book he was writing about Islam, race, in Brazil. The author's name was Habeeb Akande, and the book he would eventually release was called Illuminating the Darkness, Blacks and North Africans in Islam. As you can see from the release of the book, the title changed slightly. Habeeb had been following this blog for some time, was coming to Brazil and wanted to know if we could meet and discuss my perception of race in Brazil. We agreed to meet at Sao Paulo's shopping mall in downtown Sao Paulo one day in 2013. As we purchased a few drinks during our conversation, fate would have it that another brother, this one from Angola, happened to be walking by when he saw me and heard Habeeb refer to me as Marcus. The brother introduced himself, and I discovered that it was the filmmaker Aristoteles Kanjimba. He was preparing the release of his documentary Afro Cariocas, a film about perceptions of Blackness in the city of Rio de Janeiro. Needless to say, the conversation was well worth the few hours the three of us conversed. 3 non-Brazilian Black men discussing the question of race in Brazil. The thing that all three of us noticed, among other things, and that I would later note that numerous other non-Brazilian Black men and women who had extended experience with Brazil also noticed, was the apparent obsession Afro-Brazilian men as well as women seem to have for guaranteeing that their families would be white or whiter in the future through relationships with whiter or white partners. Okay. So, I've talked about this topic quite a bit. The objective today is to listen to what an Afro-Brazilian man had to say about this agenda as he saw it himself. Afro Cariocas, that's what the documentary that I was talking about with the Angolan guy that I met. I haven't talked to him in years. I have to reach out, maybe do an interview with him one day. I don't know. I don't know whatever came out of his documentary, Afro Cariocas. I don't know. I'm gonna have to search for that, maybe get in contact with him because I think he was seeking funding at the time to continue to, finish up the film. So let me see what else. Right now, I just want to go to the video of the interview that Habeeb recorded and released in 2018. The interview featured in today's video comes courtesy of Habeeb Akande. Akande is a British Nigerian writer, sex expert, and historian. He is the author of 7 published books on race and sex in African and Muslim cultures. Akande has appeared on the BBC and the Islam Channel, and as of a few years ago, he was working on a documentary regarding Islam in Brazil. In the interview below, posted in June of 2018, Akande speaks with Afro-Brazilian teacher Abdul Karim, who gives a personal example of how the teoria de embranquecimento, or whitening theory, is spread through Black Brazilian families. So this is his personal story, what he can remember going on in his family. So right now, I'm going to take a pause for the cause. No need to overdub this because I think you guys, okay, it's a Black Brazilian guy. I don't know if he's a teacher of grade school or a college professor. I'm not sure, but I think you'll be able to understand his English pretty well. So let's check out what he had to say.
Can you speak a little bit about colorism in Brazil and how it impacts interracial relationships?
Sure. The first time I experienced colorism, and at that time, there wasn't this word colorism for us. For me, it's a new concept. But the practice is very old. It's an old practice. It's an old mentality, an old mindset. But I have an example in my own family. For example, my grandmother was Black. She used it to tell her daughters, my mom and my aunties, to marry only white men. Why? To purify our blood from the African ancestry. So, one day I asked other Black people in Brazil if they had been told the same story on their families, and they confirmed. Also, in other Black families in Brazil, there was this mentality of purifying the blood by interracial marriage. So this, we call it in Portuguese, embranquecimento. It's the idea that the more you get near to white features, you are being more good, more acceptable for society. It's no wonder that here in Brazil, even among Black people, the Black people we have light skin, many times they are preferred to commercial or TV roles, preferred over Black people who's got darker skin. That's the reality. Nobody can deny it.
Okay, so you heard what Professor Abdul Karim had to say about seeing this process going on in his family. You know, if you listen to what he talked about, something he says, I have an example from my own family. He goes on to talk about my grandmother was Black. She used to tell her daughters, my mom and my aunties, to marry only white men. Why? To purify our blood from African ancestry. So in essence, what his own grandmother was telling him is the exact same thing you see in this famous image, this famous painting from 1895. It was created with the idea of Brazilian elites. Their goal was to whiten the population. So as I've spoken on this painting numerous times on this channel, as well as on the blog, the dark-skinned Black grandmother apparently had a relationship with a white man, creating a mixed or mulatta daughter, who in turn had a relationship with a white man, could be just a white guy, or, some people think it's a Portuguese immigrant to Brazil. I don't know. They produce a white or near white child. So what Professor Karim was saying is pretty much, you can visualize this in this painting. So again, my point is, it's not always just I happen to fall in love. Sometimes it is an agenda on the part of the darker skinned person to pursue have a relationship, marry, and have children with a whiter partner to produce whiter children. I mean, how many more people do we have to say, do we have to listen to who can reveal that they heard this within their own households growing up? Okay. Let me see, what else do we want to talk about here today? So just a lot of the articles where I've talked about, racism and interracial relationships. Black Brazilians are taught to overvalue whiteness. In essence, that's what's going on here. Racism within interracial families, you'll find that the whiter side of a family that's mixed will say negative things, pejorative things, make racist jokes about the black side of the family. People will grow up thinking it's the norm until they come into something what we'll call racial literacy, where they come to understand, like, dang, the white people in my family used to say this about us, the darker skinned people in the family. Now I know that that was blatant racism. Okay. What else do we have here? Let's see. Interracial relationships are one of the most glaring symptoms of Brazilian racism. Some black people use white people as a social passport to feel more accepted. Why are you dating that black guy? Are you trying to dirty up the family's blood? When anti-black racism comes from black and brown families themselves, and on that it goes. Okay. The other thing I want to point out here is it's intriguing to juxtapose the ideology in Brazil that says, bring me home a white man or a white girl. We have to whiten the family. Okay. On the other side, on the American side, it says, bring me home a black girl. This was an article that came out on, I think it's, salon.com. You have two ideas about how what type of people want you to bring home in a relationship. In the United States, it says, look, bring me home a black girl. In Brazil, it's kind of accepted, bring home a white person, somebody that can help us clear this stain of blackness, in our family. Okay. So with the rise of interracial relationships, this is something that you're hearing more and more. You've heard this for a number of years, as interracial relationships have definitely exploded since 1967, striking down the ban against interracial relationships, unions, marriages within the United States. Okay. So people are stressing now, with so many people in the United States, particularly in the black side, choosing to marry across color lines. And a lot of the black families are pushing back, like, hey, bring me home a black girl. Okay. It's not something that you find in Brazil. That's growing now, but for years, the ideology was whiten the family. So one thing I wanted to point out, this is from an article from 2018, the difference between race in the United States and Brazil. There was an intriguing piece towards the end of this article that I want to talk about. Marina Alvarez, a 22-year-old student of scenic arts at the State University of Sao Paulo, has in her family an explicit case of the whitening law introduced during this period in Brazil, late 1800s, early 1900s. Despite having on her father's side a family with very little racial admixture of black predominance and African descent, the mother's family is one of the most typical families with different ethnic groups scattered throughout the country. Her mother is a descendant of Indians, blacks, and Italians, and now declares herself to be a mulher negra de pele clara, light-skinned black woman. However, Marina says that as her mother, Rosana, has a slightly lighter skin tone, very fine features, and a sharp nose, she grew up with the idea that her mother was a white woman and her father a homem negro retinto, very, very dark-skinned black man. As it turns out, the perception of Rosana, Marina's mother, changed over time, going from white woman to light-skinned black woman. Marina says that her great-grandmother, that is, the mother of her grandmother's mother, was a case of extremely violent miscegenation. Indigenous, but with her African father enslaved, Marina's great-grandmother lived in her tribe throughout her childhood and adolescence. Marina tells how her grandmother was laçada, kidnapped from her tribe away from her family to marry an Italian white man, her great-grandfather. The story the family knows is that the marriage worked as an exchange, and her Italian-born grandfather hated being married and having children with a woman identified as non-white. The exchange worked more or less like this. The condition for him to be able to immigrate to Brazil with a lot of land and a house was to marry a black woman and reinforce the Brazilian miscegenation plan, Marina said. So what they're talking about here is Brazil opened its borders towards the latter part of the 19th century to millions of European immigrants with the goal of increasing the white population and also promoting interracial unions to produce whiter children. But what this article is saying is that, and specifically this case, and I like to research to see if this happened, on a mass level, one of the criteria for, they're talking about a white man or an Italian from that time. Okay, we'll give you land and, we'll give you everything you need to succeed in this country, but you have to marry a black woman. So it's openly said. It's like, okay, this is what Brazil was doing. It's not something that I'm creating. It's something that we find in history. But this was intriguing because I never knew that it went that far, where individually, like, hey, we'll allow you in the country. We'll give you something to make it. We'll give you a plot of land, a house, but you have to marry this black woman and have children with her because we have this whitening process going on and we need your help. Okay. Eugenics in Brazil. Another big point. Have to do a full video about that one day. We blacks are born and raised so that we don't want to marry each other. Okay. Let me see. Here's another good article right here. Defenders of white supremacy in Brazil. It should say more powerful than the Ku Klux Klan. When I lived in Sao Paulo, I think it was on, I can't remember if it was the west side, the west zone of Sao Paulo, but there was a neighborhood called Tatuapé. That I would be over in Tatuapé maybe once or twice a week. And one of the plazas, one of the plazas, one of the regions of Tatuapé was called Silvio Romero. I just knew the name as, that's Plaza Silvio Romero. That's where, there was a big, area where you had a lot of shops and stores. Had a lot of restaurants in this particular area. It was called the Plaza Silvio Romero. I just knew it as a name until I did some more research. Let me see what it says here. Silvio Romero, one of the most influential polymaths at the time, saw the possibility of white hegemony, constituting a race that could match that of the Europeans. Silvio Romero being, an intellectual from the time. Let me see, one of the founding intellectual of the Brazilian Academy of Letters. This is what he's quoted as writing. By natural selection, however, after giving the help it needs, the white type will take over until he is pure and beautiful as in the old world. It will be when it is fully acclimated on the continent. Two facts will largely contribute to this result. On the one hand, the extension of African trafficking, we're talking about slave traffic, and the constant disappearance of the Indians and on the other European immigration. So what he's saying is, if we stop European or African, the transportation of more enslaved Africans, stop the traffic there, deal with the black population as it doesn't. If we cut off the constant transport of enslaved Africans, we'll just deal with the black population as it is. So cut off slave traffic, the disappearance of the Indians, and the increase of European immigration and immigrants coming into the country to whiten the country, increase the white population while lowering the black and brown population. That's in essence what he's saying. That's Silvio Romero. I'm saying, I always am fascinated to find out who are the people behind the names of so many streets and avenues. So anyway, that brings me back to, what the point of this video was. As we can see, this is just a well-documented plan for Brazilians to whiten themselves over the course of some centuries. And what I appreciated is this guy brought a personal story from his own family. So how are you going to argue with that? If there's, other black and brown Brazilians who can basically be honest about this, just talk about, hey, I grew up in a family where my grandmother and my mother and my grandfather used to say this as well. It just gives more documentation that the theory of embranquecimento continues to live in the hearts and souls of many, many black and brown Brazilians. So anyway, what did you think of what this professor had to say? What did you think about the video overall? For those of you who insist to saying that I'm against interracial relationships, this gets to the bottom of what I'm actually talking about. It doesn't have anything to do with me rejecting interracial. I just want to get to the question, okay, how did you guys get together? Maybe some of the black and brown Brazilians who are watching this video can ask themselves that question. It's not for me to answer. I'm not Brazilian, but I do like hearing it from Brazilians themselves. So anyway, with that said, I'm going to end this video here. Let's get the conversations going. Drop a comment in the comment section, like this video, share this video, consider subscribing to the channel, click on that notification bell so that you'll know when I put up a new video. And with that said, I'm going to end this video here and request that you all come back. Check out the next video that I post here at Black Brazil Today.